What your next step is then is you're going to find out exactly what subjects you need to take to qualify for these post-secondary programs, what marks you need, if any. You're going to find out what subjects you're going to take when you start the program, how much it's going to cost, all of that information. And as you do your research and find out more and more about each one of those programs, it's going to become more and more clear to you which ones that you should apply for. So you might start off with a list of 25, and then you're going to narrow it down to 15, and then you're going to narrow it down to 10, and then by the time you're ready to make your decision, you've narrowed it down to the ones that you think are the best ones for you. Now we're looking at 4 different basic post-secondary programs, and university tends to be 3 years in length. It can be up to 5 years in length. There are 2 types of programs at university. One is general arts and science, and that covers maybe 25 different types of programs. So like within the arts, you've got history and psychology and philosophy and sociology and geography and a whole bunch of courses. And in the honors programs, some of them are specific honors programs, 4-year degrees. They're more specific, like physical education, nursing, engineering. They're more targeted, and they have more compulsory subjects. But one thing you'll find with university is that there's a fair amount of choice or options that you choose, and you plan your program as you go through it. There are graduate programs like that you take after you've completed your first 3 years. Then you can go on to take things like medicine, physiotherapy, optometry, and things like that. College is very different in that it is usually 2 years in length, and it is more specific. If you take a program like fire alarm inspector, it's very specific. The courses are basically all compulsory, and it's very structured. Career college is very similar to community college, except it's private schools, so they may cost you more. They might be shorter because they might condense the program, but they're all very legitimate and good programs. Apprenticeship is completely different. Here you get hired by an employer who, for 5 years, trains you, and while you're doing that training, on-the-job training, you spend a certain amount of time, 5 to 6 weeks, in the classroom at a college. You can shorten that 5-year tenure by going to a community college first and taking a pre-apprenticeship program, and that usually will help you get into the apprenticeship program. Okay, so let's move on. And this is simply a little graph showing you that the entry-level salaries for all of them are fairly similar, but where they differ is your potential to earn money is greater with the more education that you take.
And this is a single choice response. We're interested if campus tours, programs that are being offered, if it's the employment rates of graduates, or if it's scholarships and bursaries that are available that makes a big difference, the main determining factor when you're choosing a program.
When it comes to questions, we have several here. But the first question is, what are the pros and cons of a gap year? Now, I actually took a gap year after I finished my university degree, rather than between high school and university. And the definite advantage for me was it was a time for me to do some traveling, but also take a break. I studied at Oxford, so it was 3 very academic and rigorous years, so I needed a little bit of a time out. And it was definitely a wise decision on my part. I enjoyed it as a time of reflection. It allowed me to settle in and actually think about what I wanted to pursue. The only con that I would say is make sure you make the most of your gap year. What I did was, as well as taking some time off, I made sure to still stay involved and do some useful activities. If you're applying for a job and there are gaps in your resume, maybe because you've done some traveling, you'll need to sort of explain them and explain the reasons behind your choices. And it's also good to make sure that you keep your skills current and that you brush up on them. So I always kept reading. I was still involved. I volunteered and I worked for a little while. So that allowed me to make the most of my gap year.
Reflecting back on high school, I think a gap year really depends on why you're doing it and what you're planning to do about it. So if you're, let's say, thinking about doing a gap year and doing a 5th year in school, even though you have the academic average or the prerequisites to get into university, then you sort of have to question why you're staying in that environment. I can tell you right now, for people who did stay a 5th year when they could have gone to university or college because of some lifestyle issues, they found their 5th year to be very different because their surroundings were different, the people in grade 12 were different. So definitely don't take a 5th year for the social aspect of it. If it's not knowing what you want to do educationally, I think it's a fair thing to maybe take some time to think about it. But I think you should also maybe be more proactive in the sense that just apply and then make those decisions when you have choices to be made. The last thing you want is in June, sitting there in graduation and then realizing, wait a minute, a year is a really long time. What I really just wanted was a couple months or the summer, and I was just tired of being in school, but I know I wanted to get into this program and I didn't apply for it. That's a very different story. Again, like Faiza said, if you're taking a 5th year and not going to school and taking a year off, if that's because of work issues or financial issues, make the most out of it. So really keep the next step in mind. So if it's something that you want to do, like nursing, then maybe volunteer on your 5th year in a hospital or a care or clinic or some sort. So yeah, different reasons for different people, but I think it's a matter of logically thinking about your options and why you're doing the things you're doing.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with both Ian and Faiza. A gap year, for some people, it's really important to take that time to figure out what you want to do. I know sometimes when you're in your final year of school and all that work is piling up, you feel really pressured to make a decision right away. But that's not the point. The point is really just to consider your future and to consider your options. And if you don't know what your options are, then maybe it's a good time to not only try and look around on the SchoolFinder website, but to make an appointment with your guidance counselor at school if you still happen to be a high school student. So, and they're there to help you, even a year after you graduate. I remember when I was considering going back to another program, I visited one of my favorite guidance counselors to talk to her about it. So it's not, just because you leave school, it doesn't mean that options are closed to you, but you do need to make the most of your time off if you do happen to take that extra year for whatever reason. And yeah, volunteer work is a great opportunity for you to figure out if you want to pursue that particular path or just to build up your resume. Roger, do you have any?
I think all that advice is just fantastic. I have nothing else to add that would be any better.
The one last thing I would add is there's really no cons, only because if whatever decision you decide to make, you will live with, and that you will sort of figure it out along the way. So if it's a year, it's not going to make it or break it for you.
Yeah, and whatever decision you make, it's right because it's right for you. Right?
I think we'll do one more question during this poll, and then we'll answer the rest. So someone was asking, is it more realistic to plan for a long-term career or several jobs throughout a lifetime? Roger, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the whole idea with this model that we're encouraging you to take is that you're going to plan your education, and at the end of your education, then you're going to look around for work, and we're going to talk in a minute about lifestyle and really where you want to live and what type of a job you want, and that's where you'll start, and then from there you will find that you will find a path through employment that will take you in a variety of different directions. But to get started, Get your education first.
So it looks like a large percentage of you are looking at programs offered. So that's very, very good, because that's one way onto your career path, to employment and such. It's not really where you go to school, it's what you do with the skills that you learn from your program. Anyway, I'm going to put that poll away and go back to our presentation.